All right, well, everyone, it looks like it's 11 o'clock. People will be, I guess, jumping in here. Welcome to this presentation called 7 Up, 7 Ways to Boost Your AAC Implementation. A couple things before we get started. One is that there are captions available in the Zoom. So if you were to, I think it's down at the bottom in the controls or wherever the controls are on your computer, there's a CC button so you can have captions if you want. I like to turn them on no matter what. The second thing you should know is that this presentation is done in Google Slides, and you have access to those slides. If you can see it on the screen now, it's bit.ly/7upAAC. I'm going to type that in the chat so you can have that as well, just in case. This is also me vamping. If you want to get it from the QR code, you can do that. 7upAAC. Let's see if I got that right. 7upAAC. All right. Make sure that link works, but that link should work, and it should take you to the slide deck where there's you're going to want to have the slide deck for this presentation because there's a number of hyperlinks in it, and this is meant to be a sort of an interactive thing where we have the Jamboard going on, there's a Google form, and there might be some other stuff that we want to click on that you'll want. So you're going to want to get the bit.ly/7upAAC and have that in another tab or have it on a second device so that you can participate in a bunch of the I don't know, experiences that I got put together for you. So we only have 45 minutes together, so I'm going to get right into it because there's a lot to cover. And the first thing to sort of tell you about is me. In case you don't know me, my name is Chris Bugaj. I am the day job where I'm taking my lunch break right now is for Loudoun County Public Schools up in Northern Virginia. And I have been working there for Donna. Well, we won't even talk about how long we've known each other and how many years we've been working, but many years. My background is a speech language pathologist, and about 3 years into my career, they asked me to be one of the founding members of our assistive technology team. So I've been working in the area of assistive technology for over 20 years now. But I like to think of myself as an inclusive design facilitator, somebody that helps educators design educational experiences that are really meant for everybody, as opposed to like coming in and retrofitting something. I had the great fortune of doing a podcast with Rachel Madel. She's a private speech therapist out on the West Coast, and I'm working in a private school, working in a public school out here on the East Coast. And we put our heads together and we do a podcast every week called Talking with Tech. That's a free resource. Go check it out. And then a couple other disclosures here is that I'm not getting paid by 7-Up or the Pepsi Corporation. This has nothing to do with them. What I am getting paid for is if you buy my books. So I've written a couple books. The most recent book I've written with Mike Murata and Beth Poss and Karen Janowski. Mike, you know, is part of the organization that's putting on this presentation. That most recent book is called Inclusive Learning 365 EdTech Strategies for Every Day of the Year. It's 365 pages. Well, it's many more pages than 365, but each page is meant to have one strategy on it, and that you could read one strategy a day, again, to help you design inclusive experiences for everybody. And the book before that was The New Assistive Tech, Make Learning Awesome for All. Okay, enough of that. Let's get into the stuff. So, oops, I'm going to turn off my Teams. Teams is popping up. Let me just close that real quick. Quit. There we go. Okay. So presentation. So this is all going to be about implementation. These are implementation strategies. There'll be a little bit about selection because although this slide sort of has them as separate things, all of these things, considering what you need to consider, selecting an AAC tool, implementing that AAC, and then reflecting on that. Here it sort of looks like it's segmented. Really, I think of them as a Mobius strip. They're all sort of interwoven together and mixed together, but we're going to mostly focus on implementation here. Sound like a plan? of course, use the chat, put questions in there. Feel free to be engaged in this interactive discussion. A big focus of myself for many years is changing AAC implementation and really improving outcomes for everyone. Traditional implementation there is has not worked or has not worked really well, and so I'm really always focusing on what's a way we can revolutionize our AAC implementation so that the same pain points don't keep happening. Like, we do a great job selecting this awesome tool that nobody ever uses, right? Let's change that whole dynamic so people are using it. And I think over the years, more people are using and talking about AAC than ever before, which is of course extremely exciting. And yet it feels like we can't get there fast enough. You know, it still feels like we're dragging this giant ship through the ocean, you know, as opposed to like rocketing there at lightning speed. Okay. So what can we do to make it a little bit faster?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Oh, hi, how you doing?
Good. Naomi, you good? Okay. So here's what we're not going to talk about. This presentation.
Let me send you another Zoom link, okay? What is it saying?
I'm going to see if I can mute her. Give me 1 second.
Oh, no. Oh, no, you're supposed to be in captions. I will send you the.
Okay, I muted Naomi. All right, so what we're not going to talk, I did it, Julie. Cool, thank you. What we're not going to talk much about for this presentation is core vocabulary and aided language stimulation. This presentation sort of assumes you've heard of core vocabulary, you know what that is. It sort of assumes that you've heard of aided language stimulation. These would be 2 of the 7 ups of the 7 things we were going to discuss. But I feel like most people know this already. If you don't, there's some resources here linked on this slide for you to go back and listen to or watch afterwards. But it sort of assumes this. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to talk about core vocabulary. A lot of the other strategies involve core vocabulary. It doesn't mean we're not going to talk about aided language stimulation. A lot of the other stuff integrates aided language stimulation, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on what these things are. We sort of assume that you know what these things are. You feel good about that? Can you put it in the chat? Yes, like, yes, Chris, good. Let's roll. We don't need core vocabulary. I've heard of it. I know what it means. Aided language stimulation. Good to go. Thanks, Joan. Oh, good, Joan, to see you here too. Yes, great. Let's go. Thanks, Brita. Everyone knows. All right, cool. So the next thing we're going to talk about are these. Ugly. Okay, there we go. Are these, you'll note there's not 7, there's 8 things on the screen. I added a last one, an 8th one here to talk about. And so here's what they are. The specific language system approach, morphemes over words. That little sign there means like morphemes trumps words or morphemes are greater than words. Consistent morpheme location, phrasal verbs, least to most prompting, solving authentic problems, peer support, and coaching the family. Because we're already a few minutes into this presentation, there's 8 things here, there's a chance we might not get to them all. So what I thought we would do is say, we don't necessarily have to take these in order 1 through 8, the way they're listed in the slides. And in fact, later on, you'll notice that if you wanted to go back, you could go right to this slide and each one of these hyperlinks to the section of the presentation on the specific strategy that we're talking about here. So I thought, as a way of doing this presentation together, is we'd vote. Let's find out what you, the people here participating, want to hear most about. And so the way we're going to do that is that I created a Google form for us. So which would you like to learn about? If you'll click on actually the entire thing is links to the Google form, but if you click on the word vote, that'll take you to the Google form and vote. All 8 of those are listed there. Choose the one that is like the one that's burning in your mind the most. Like, I don't even know what he's talking about when it's like morphemes over words. What does that mean when it comes to AAC? Maybe that's what's important to you, or you've never heard of the specific language system first approach. Maybe that's what's important to you. And we will find out what the responses are. In fact, I'll jump out of the presentation here and we'll go over to this. Look, I had it pulled up in another window, and we'll see what are people coming up with. Morphemes over words seems to be pretty popular. I'll give it another second here. Everything else is pretty even. So far, only 9 people have responded. Again, if you need the link, it's here. Here, hold on. I'll put the whole link in the chat too as well, so that you can get it right from the chat. And this way, everybody gets to vote. Multiple means here. You can get it from the chat, or you can get it from the the slide deck. Go back to the voting and see. Oh yeah, what are corephemes? That's an interesting. Phrasal verbs. People know what those are. I'm interested in how that integrates with AAC. At least a quarter of the people want to hear about coaching right now. 13 responses. Solving authentic problems. All right. Well, continue to feel free to vote, because I'm going to return back to this to decide what to do number 2. But it looks like number 1 here, people are interested in morphemes over words. Let's learn about corephemes. That seems to be our winner right now. And then we'll keep going. I will keep coming back to this to decide what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so morphemes over words. What are corephemes? All right, so here's a little meme. I bet he's thinking about how to teach core vocabulary. And what he's thinking about is, how does an AAC learner, how does someone who's learning language using AAC learn the past tense ED? How do they learn ING? How do they learn plural S, right? If we've already assumed that we are presuming potential, and that a student is going to say, we're someday, with given the right tools, with enough time and the right instruction, a student is going to say whatever they want to say, however they want to say it. Like, that's the end game, right? Well, that means they need to learn morphemes. And for those of you that are not, yeah, exactly, EJ, snug, right? Okay, so that means we have to ask this sort of question. How does anybody learn morphemes? And one of the, when I mean morphemes, what I mean is the little parts of words like ing, ed, s, plural s. How does someone learn that? How does someone learn ing? So put it in the chat here. How does someone learn to even if they're not an AAC user? Like, how did you learn to say ing on all these things? How did this little baby girl here eventually learn to be someone who could say ing? Modeling and hearing it, modeling, getting it wrong, repeating it, modeling, hearing it, making mistakes, and then saying, well, that's not exactly how that sounds. That doesn't sound right, and fixing it, right? Not doing that necessarily cognitively, but or consciously, but doing that subconsciously. Language models, right. So here's the question, okay? If we think of all of those morphemes, those little parts of words, and the words themselves. So go is a morpheme, and going are 2 morphemes put together, right? The speech therapists in the room know what I'm talking about. They remember morpheme instruction from back in their first school days. But if you're not a speech language pathologist, that's what it really means. It means it's breaking down the words into to these little meaningful parts, right? If you think of each morpheme as a sand timer, or maybe a bucket, right? And that bucket or sand timer lives in every individual person's head. So there's a bucket for ing, and there's a bucket for go, and there's a bucket for ed, and there's a bucket for do, and there's all the core words, and all of the morphemes are little buckets in your head, or little sand timers in your head. And every time, what you all said is modeling and hearing it and parent correction. Every time it's modeled, it's like putting a little drop or a little grain of sand in the sand timer, or a little drop of water in that bucket, and it fills up, and eventually when it spills over to the top, or the sand timer turns over because it's filled up so much, then it comes out expressively. Then they start to use it expressively. That might be a way, an analogy we might use to help somebody that doesn't really understand AAC, or doesn't really understand morphemes, or how that all comes about, is that we keep putting drops in buckets, or we put little grains of sand, right? Okay, so let's talk about what are these little morphemes. Well, you can see here, this is a kind of a classic chart. ing, I mentioned it many times now, that's a morpheme. In is one, on is one, plural s is one, irregular past tense like came, fell, right? Okay, and note the age of mastery here. ing is actually mastered before in and on in verbal speakers, right? Plural s comes next, right? Ed, es, right? Okay, possessives, right? Look how early the rate of acquisition here. And this is mastery. Students at the age have mastered these things. So look at that. Irregular past tense verbs is somewhere between 25 and 46 months, which is, again, be somewhere between 2 and 4 years of age, right? ing is mastered before you're the age of 2. Most students are mastering this. And that brings us to our first Jamboard activity. If you could click on this link, and I'll also put it in the chat. I want to ask you this question about your instruction and your implementation for this. So this should bring you over to this Jamboard. And this Jamboard has the morphemes listed out, a bunch of different morphemes. And all I'm going to ask you to do is you'll note down at the bottom, there's a green check mark and there's a red X. And here's what I'd like you to do. If you've explicitly taught this as a target in your intervention, I want you to put it in a green check mark. But if you haven't explicitly taught it, then put a red X on it. And let's see where our instruction lies, just for the people in this room. If you haven't taught it explicitly, then put a red X on it. Okay, so, and keep working on it, but let's talk about what we're seeing here as a result, right? First of all, I'm seeing that there's a prevalence to teach on and in, and maybe plural s explicitly, right? Over some of these other morphemes, a bias, maybe you will, because we've totally understand core vocabulary, and on and in are core vocabulary, and so we're going to teach those explicitly for sure. But these other morphemes, look at the red X's, and even if you look at ing there's no red X's, but there's only like 3 check marks, which makes me think we just haven't put red X's there yet, and that it's not being targeted very explicitly. It might happen anecdotally, meaning yes, I'm modeling my words, and so the way I'm saying a certain sentence, I might model ing, even though ing is not the focus of my lesson. The root morpheme is. So I might model do, and do is the word, but I might not be modeling doing, as the word. And what does that all mean? Well, again, if you go back to this chart and you see that ing actually comes as mastered before I and in and on, and these other morphemes are really early onset, it's a question that you have to ask about your implementation is, should I be targeting morphemes as opposed to core vocabulary? Or should I be targeting morphemes with core vocabulary? Which really brings me to the term corephemes. Instead of modeling core words and focus on core words, what if we changed our focus to focus on corephemes, which is really core vocabulary plus morphemes. And you're not going to find corephemes in any literature. I made up that term, but it's something to think about, right? It's like, what if we modeled, if we really think a student is going to learn ing and plural s and ed, then we can't have red X's on that Jamboard. We need to start putting green check marks on there. We got to make that part of our targeted, focused instruction. Cool. This is what you're looking at here in this particular slide is the COLE. It's the Continuum of Language Expression. It is just a Google sheet that me and a handful of colleagues put together. We looked at a bunch of different early language assessments and charts and books, and we made this our own little tool here about early language development, and it broke down the early language development into stages over here. And it's meant to be something where you can bring it up, and as a team, you can sit down and discuss these sort of stages of early language development, where it forces you to ask, well, have we heard the students say use ing? You know, how often have we heard them say use ing? Not observed, occasionally, usually, always. And because of the way it's laid out, it might point out to people on the team, like, yeah, we got to start modeling that if we think that that's how students are going to learn it, is through us modeling it, which is what you all said. Then we have to start modeling ing earlier. And why that's so important is because something that is still prevalent around the country, maybe around the world, is this idea that we need low tech before we can do high tech. Someone might need to prove something on a low tech board before I get to a high tech board. Well, it's a lot harder to model ed and ing and plural s on a core vocabulary board. You're having a robust system that provides those morphemes. This gives you even more ammunition, evidence, whatever term you want to use to compel administration to say, I need robust applications to put in the students' hands. All that good stuff. Are we liking this so far? Does that make sense? Is that a growth moment for many of you? Put it in the chat. How are you feeling about this so far? What do you think about the term corephemes and changing our instruction on core vocabulary to core vocabulary plus these little parts of words? Is that resonating with you? All right, now let's go back. Okay, nobody's writing, which is freaking me out a little bit. Like maybe it's like, no, Chris, we're just going to focus on core. You didn't sell it hard enough, that core vocabulary. We're going to just focus on core vocabulary. The ing, that'll come someday, even though it's early developing in the speakers and people who speak. Okay, so that's morphemes and morphemes over words, corephemes. Going back to our responses here, it looks like, oh, there's a tie for third with 13%, but at 17%, we got phrasal verbs. All right, so let's go back to phrasal verbs. Go back to here and click present and click on the phrasal verb section. All right, phrasal verbs. You ready for this? Phrasal. This is a Matrix reference. For those of you that don't know what the Matrix is or haven't seen those movies, you got to catch up on them because the fourth movie's coming out. But you have to understand that once I explain and we talk about what phrasal verbs are, it's sort of like taking the pill that you see the Matrix, because you're going to start to hear and understand what phrasal verbs are all over the place, over and over and over again. They're going to pop out like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've ever thought of that before. And now once you hear about it, know what they are, it'll just be like glaring all the time. You're going to talk to your family members and partners and friends, and you're going to hear them say phrasal verbs over and over and over again. So what are phrasal verbs? Well, if you look at core vocabulary, again, for most of our instruction is on core vocabulary, an interesting phenomenon happens when you take one core vocabulary word and you put it together with another core vocabulary word. It often changes the meaning. So for instance, got it. Put it in the chat. When I say got it, what does that really mean? What's the one word that it really means? Is the chat broken?
Chris, scroll down to the bottom of your chat. I'm thinking there's tons of stuff coming in. So
yeah, my chat is broken.
Bottom.
My chat is broken. Interesting. Hold on. Let me close it and reopen it. Weird. Okay, so my chat's broken. I don't see it. In fact, there's a whole weird thing going on here with Zoom, where it's all like grayed out and everything. All right, but so people, I'm guessing there what you're writing there is the word understand, right, or comprehend. So how about, let's see, this is broken and I'm relying on chat. What's another good way? I know what we can do. Here, we'll go to the Jamboard. We'll go to here. We'll go to slide frame 6 in the, or frame 5 in the Jamboard, and we'll use this as our chat. You can use the text messages over here, or you can use the sticky note over here to answer these questions. Cool. And then I can
Chris,
monitor.
you're still showing the coal up. We're not seeing you navigate beyond the coal.
Really? You still see the coal as I'm moving forward?
Yes.
All right.
You're frozen.
Everything's frozen. Well, I mean, I'm not frozen. It's working, but Zoom seems to be frozen. All right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna leave and come back. So everyone hang out for a second and I'll come back. I'm gonna quit Zoom. All right, thanks for being with me. Am I back? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. And let's see, let me bring the chat back up. Can I see you all in the chat? Let's try it one more time. Yeah, now I see you. Okay, so when in doubt, restart, right? And it worked like a dream. Okay, so sorry about the little hiccup there. Back to phrasal verbs then. So everyone was sort of answering what phrasal verbs were. You knew that phrasal verbs, or that what got it meant understand. So let's do some of these together. What about go out? What does go out mean? Oops. Leave. Or what else? Date, right? How about get out? What does get out mean? No way, which is another phrasal verb, Whitney, right? No way means don't believe, right? Don't believe it, Donna. Exactly. It could be get out, could also mean go away. And by the way. Go away is another phrasal verb, right? Seriously, there you go, Julie, right? Okay, how about get down? What is get down? I won't type them in. We'll just dance, right? Right? But it could also mean hide, right? Or duck, right? All right, so you're getting the idea here that when you take these core vocabulary words and you put them together, in fact, how about we do this one? Zoom messed up, right? It messed up. Well, mess and up, and you put those together, mess up. Well, those are like, you put those together and it means broken, right? Phrasal verbs, when you use core vocabulary and you really think about core vocabulary and you're using them in context, it often changes the meaning of that individual core vocabulary word. And then you might think, okay, Chris, well, I'm teaching individual core vocabulary words right now. Can we eventually get to putting them in context? I mean, I'm trying to do core vocabulary repetition with variety. Maybe I'll get to that somewhere down the line. Well, there's some research on how early these phrasal verbs are put together. And if again, in students that are using their voice as using verbal speech as their primary form of expression, what you find is these phrasal verbs, put on, take off, clean up, get down, start to emerge in children before the age of 2. If you look at this particular chart, look at all of these phrasal verbs and look at the early age when students start to use them, right? All before the age of 2 or right around the age of 2, definitely before the age of 3. What that really means is teaching core vocabulary in isolation is not really as effective as maybe teaching core vocabulary along with putting that word together with another core vocabulary word and teaching phrasal verbs explicitly. Cool? Make sense, everybody? Make sense? It's another phrasal verb. Like I said, you're going to start to see it like the Matrix. You're going to start to see it all over the place. All over the place. Can't stop. All right, let's take a look at, okay, I think our number 3 was peer support and specific language system first approach. All right, let's do specific language system first approach first. If people wanted to hear about that, and that's right here at the beginning. So what is the specific language system first approach? The specific language system first approach is essentially a way to address a number of problems all at once. The first problem is that there's you who's trying to do AAC implementation, and it's so hard to get, like I said, you all know what the problems are with AAC implementation. It is a big, it's a big monster to try and wrangle, right? And one of the reasons it's a monster is because of this. Something we've been wrestling with for a very long time, and it has gotten worse since the pandemic, is the turnover rate of educators. So you see that there's not a lot of people flocking to education right now. A lot of people are leaving, and the special ed turnover rate is much higher than the general ed turnover rate, right? People think, well, do I really want to do another year of special education? Or maybe I could be a PE teacher. Maybe I'll just go start a chocolate factory or whatever. They'll do something else rather than work in special education. I think in our neck of the woods, like autism teachers, I think they have a lifespan of 3 to 5 years. You know, if we can get them for 5 years, we seem to be lucky. Are you feeling that pain? Do you put that in the chat? Are you finding that you have a high turnover rate of special ed? EJ's saying 100%, right? Okay, so what that means for AAC, Brita, right? Okay, cool. Julie, yes, absolutely, Catherine, right? David, all right. What that means is that we're spending a lot of time doing education. We're teaching them, we're training them, we might be coaching them, and then they leave, and then we got to start all over again with a new batch of people, right? And even if they don't leave, the students leave. So the students might go from 5th grade where, yeah, you know what? I've been working with them. I got that 5th grade teacher, the speech therapist. They all know how to implement it. Man, they're working on corephemes and they're teaching phrasal verbs, and they're the other things. They're keeping things in the same spot, and all the other stuff, right? They're doing the stuff. They've got aided language stimulation. And then the student has to go to 6th grade in the middle school where they don't know that at all, right? It's a whole new team, new speech therapist, new staff. So that's frustrating. There's also this myth of progress that happens where students apparently make progress throughout the year. It's very rare that I see students with any IEP goal ever not make progress on the IEP. But specific to AAC, they make progress, some sort of progress with AAC. The end of the school year comes. Now there's a transition with teachers. Either the student is left or the teacher is left, or in some case, both. And now the new team starts over again, and they often think, you know what? That old system, that didn't work. We need a new system. We're going to change it, or I really don't know how to teach language. And so we go back to the new system or the new way of doing things. And again, the student starts making progress on the new system, but not really progress on language, right? If you've given them no other choice, they'll use the thing that you gave them. So there's this kind of myth of progress that happens when it comes to AAC. If I gave a student a system and we started teaching a system and they made progress on it for a year, and then I stop using that system and I give them another system for whatever reason, they don't have access to that old system anymore. They have this new system. Guess what? They have no other option but to use that new system that you gave them. So again, it's going to look like they're making progress, because man, look at that. At the beginning of the year when I gave them system number 2, they didn't know how to do anything. And by the end of the year, they know how to find a handful of words on it. So they've made progress. But what had happened if we had kept with that same system? This happens repeatedly. I think again, maybe I'm speaking to the choir here, that when things start to go awry or we see students plateau, there's a rush to change the system. We want to change the app. It's the easy answer, but it's like this. It's simple but wrong most of the time. Most of the time, what's wrong, why something is not working, why a student is plateaued, is that our intervention hasn't changed or we haven't really changed our instruction. So we want to think about this. What would we look at differently? What research would we do? How would we change our instruction to take this much more difficult path, but it's the right path for a student to continue their language growth, right? So there's all of that. And then, like I said, there's a kind of all mixed together here. There's the high turnover rate. There's changing systems way too frequently rather than focusing on one particular system and persevering. And then there's this phenomenon as well. Now, if some of you may have seen this riddle before, if you know the answer to this riddle, don't type it in. Meaning if you've seen it before. But if you haven't seen it before, what do you think is the answer to this riddle on the screen? What do touchscreens and flexible seating and word prediction and voice dictation and video on demand and kids having computers, one-to-one initiatives, computers at their seats, what do all of those things have in common? Go ahead and put it in the chat. EJ says they're all tier 1 supports now. Now, in case you're not familiar with the term tier 1 supports, what that means is that it's support that's available to everybody, where a tier 2 support would be available to a group of students, and tier 3 support would be something that's available only to individual students, right? Maria says they're AT tools. Yes, they are AT tools. What other thoughts do we have here, everybody? Or you can just type not sure, no, because I know the chat's working this time because I saw EJ and Maria type in there. They're all available in schools, they're universally available. Yeah, the truth is that if you were to hop in your DeLorean and go back in time 15, 20 years, these weren't all tier 1 supports, right? EJ, that's why you put the word now in there, right? Once upon a time, touchscreens were a tier 3 support. It was only students with disabilities that had touchscreens, but now touchscreens are used by everybody, right? Flexible seating. Any OTs in the house? Any OTs here? Remember being the first OT to say this student needs a vestibular disc, and so they can sit on this and wobble back and forth. Or we're going to take the tennis balls and we're going to put them on just 2 legs of the chair so the student can wobble back and forth, right? And that was an accommodation on students' IEPs. Now our elementary schools are sort of built around flexible seating, where there's different heights and different chairs to sit on, different lighting that you have. All of that is now something that masses use. Word prediction, how many of you used it today, right? When you were typing in your Gmail, or when you were using your phone, and as you're typing it, it completes it for you, right? Or how many of you used voice dictation today because it's built into your phone? How many students are using on-demand video and looking things up on YouTube? And how many people have one-to-one initiatives? It's just something that we do now, but all of these things go back in time. They started with students with disabilities. What does that have to do with AAC and the specific language system first approach? Is that you have to understand that tier 3 supports, to use EJ's terms there, tier 3 supports, individual supports, are not static. Over time, they flow in this direction. They go down here so that there's supports for everyone. And so what does that mean when it comes to AAC, right? Well, here's the best kept secret. Accommodations, the accommodations that are on kids' IEPs right now, if we ask general ed staff to design their education around those accommodations, then we march towards inclusion. We can design our educational experiences by saying, let's just make these accommodations available to everybody, because over time, that's what happens. So now that we know that secret, we know that riddle, let's do it intentionally, not accidentally. So when it comes to AAC, where does that live right now? It primarily lives as a tier 3 support, as an individual support. But if we know over time things flow in this direction, right? And there's some evidence that suggests that AAC is happening in that way, that it's flowing in that direction. What if we just use AAC to teach everybody, right? There you go, Maria. That's how I feel about AAC in every classroom. What if we used an AAC system in every classroom as a way to support early reading, right? Early literacy strategies. What if we used AAC to help people with, again, just as I guess literacy is the big key there. If we used it as a form of teaching for everybody. What if we use descriptive teaching as a strategy for everybody? So if you're not familiar with descriptive teaching, that's taking a fringe vocabulary word and using core vocabulary to describe that fringe vocabulary word. Well, that's just a good teaching tool to teach any sort of fringe vocabulary to any student, you know, anyone who needs to learn what concave and convex are, is it goes in, it goes out, you know. You could teach those high concept fringe vocabulary sciencey words to, or whatever, it's not just science, but content words using the core vocabulary. Cool. Jennifer wrote me privately. She said, what about classrooms where students have varied systems? How do you select the system to teach everyone? Yeah, because you sort of need one system here to teach everyone. And so I'll come back to it, Jennifer, but the idea here is to use mass feature matching. What is coming out of the wash the most? What system, if you're doing a bunch of individual evaluations, what system is your tier 3 system? Which system is most students using at tier 3? Maybe that's one way you could look at it, is look at all the systems that are currently used in your school and say which one's most frequently used. That could be our system, our go-to system. The other approach is to have a committee decide. Let's sit down and do a mass feature matching, and let's make a decision about what we want our tool to be, because we want our tool to have certain criteria. When I say feature matching, what I mean is you think about the needs of the student, or in this case, students. You make a list of what those needs are, and then you go to look for tools that best match the needs of the students. So you could have a committee that decides this is the tool that we'd like to make as our tier one tool. Does that mean that there's no tier 2 and no tier 3 strategies? No, you're always going to have this triangle here, right? It's just saying that maybe we would have most students, we would supply this is a tier 1 strategy first. And if we know for a fact that that's not going to work for a student for whatever reasons, the student, the individual student, the tier 3 would not fit, their needs do not fit with that mass feature matching that we did. So then they're going to need something different. Okay, so that's the idea behind this first specific language system first approach is that you're picking a specific language system and you're just trying it. Like a 3-year-old comes in, you're not doing a bunch of assessments to figure out what the right tool is. You're saying, this is what they get when they walk through the door. They get Lamp Words for Life. They get Proloquo. They get Speak for Yourself. Whatever, they get Touch Chat. Whatever the tool is that you chose, your district landed on as the specific language system first approach, they get that first, except if they don't. Again, if there's a reason to say, no, that doesn't work, that's not going to work for this student. We know for a fact this student so let's say you picked Lamp Words for Life. Lamp Words for Life, you can't change the cell size. A student comes in and that student has fine motor difficulties that cannot be taught to target any better, then maybe the lamp wouldn't be the right choice. I mean, there's a lot of factors in there. So, but you generally is what I'm getting at. You might start to question whether that your tier 1 tool, your Lamp Words for Life, your specific language system that you chose first wouldn't be the right tool, and they might need something else. So therefore, you would maybe you do some assessments or have discussion about what that tool might be. Right? No one's saying with the specific language system first approach that it's a one size fits all. What people are saying is that it's a one size fits most, and we don't have to waste a lot of time picking a tool just to change it again every year. It's meant to say, what if the entire district learned one tool really well? They learned how to model on it. They learned the theory behind it. Would that improve the language output for the vast majority of students? And for the students that system would not work for, would everyone's skills who are meant to support that student get better? Meaning, oh man, this student really Proloquo or Touch Chat is better, but so they shouldn't be using Lamp Words for Life. But because I know how to use Lamp Words for Life, I'm better at modeling, I'm better at descriptive teaching, and I'd be better at implementing Proloquo and Touch Chat or whatever the other tools might be. Cool. Any clues on grants, funds? Oh, I'm out of time. I'm over time. Sorry, Naomi. I got busy. So I knew we weren't going to get to all 7, which is why we voted on them. And the hiccup didn't help at all. So I'll leave you with this thought about building a culture around AAC can really be a lot easier. About learning language with AAC can be a lot easier if you adopt a specific language system first approach. You can get this to this success matrix where now you're not changing a system every year. You're embedded in one system mostly, not exclusively. And it leads to this last concept here of expanding out on Joy Zabala's set framework to providing students with or thinking of the framework of thinking about what the students' needs are, what the environment is, what the task is, and then coming up with a tool, and then not just stopping there, but providing that tool to as many people as possible. Choosing what's least restrictive and providing that tool so that it moves from tier 3 stuff to tier 1 stuff. All right, cool. That's my time, everybody. I'm sorry about the technical hiccups. And I wish we got to more. I know we weren't going to get to 7. I knew it. I knew we weren't to. But listen to the podcast. We talk about all this stuff there. And of course, hit me up if you have other questions. And I guess I'll leave it there.